Okay, so, hi. I'm Daniel, or Deku, in most online places you can find me. I don't really post anything or do much, but just because I've come across it a lot in my own experiments, I just wanted to make a short video about the odd, massive, weird interactions that are lifts in Stepmania 5, and some interesting mechanics that you kind of just get from how they've been implemented. I've just come across a bunch of these because I make 6-key Stepmania 5 charts for myself, which are incredibly garbage by any reasonable standard, but hey, I have fun. I make them play from time to time, and then I often use lifts and exploit some of these interactions for fun or to torture myself. So here, where I'm going to just show you the first oddity, the basis is pretty simple, which is that lifts are mostly internally counted as an actual note. And what this means is that if they're in a timing with any other notes, regardless of whether you've got like lifts or taps, they're chord cohered. They have one timing window, and they have to be hit at the same time, or you just don't get it at all. So I'm just going to give this a quick play here to show you what'll happen. So and as you can see, what you actually get is just that you're only seeing one timing window for each of them. You see a timing window pop up every 16th. There's no split regardless of the difference between the timing of me lifting one finger and tapping with the other. Don't mind the chart. I'm just making a Solus 4 chart for myself. But I thought this would be a decent time to make the video because this section I'm doing here just actually kind of demonstrates the point. But yeah, basically what you're seeing here is that you only get the one timing window, and this has a couple interesting side effects. So the first here is that what I'm going to do, I'll just play it again, but I'm going to actually lift really early. I'll try to make that obvious in the hand cam here. Sorry, I'm not very good. And you'll see that basically the timing windows aren't going to change that much as long as my taps are on sync. And as you can see, basically none of the lift timing windows really matter, except for this one at the end, where I forgot that there's actually just no note to go with it, so it's not counting as a chord, where it suddenly did punish me because that's no longer chord cohered with the tap. And then the side effect of this is you get some really weird punishing mechanics where these lifts are, the timings are incredibly easy because they're just synced up to the chord, but what it looks like you should be able to hit partial, because if you don't know that they're all just chord cohered, well, you get something like this. Let's show what happens if I try to hit half of this. And now I realize that I've missed the lifts under a couple of notes, but if you notice, just no matter what I do, there's no hitting this at all, because it's just chord cohered with the single lift. So that's your first interaction, and you can get some interesting things out of this. You can kind of force a lift, but you can also make lifts for effect or combo count that aren't necessarily that much harder to hit. Although, given how rarely they're used, you're probably, nobody's going to be happy that you use lifts, and this is why I don't really post these charts, aside from being totally antisocial. But anyways, that's your first interaction. Alright, so the second interaction is much less fun to be the victim of. Whereas the first one, it's got its creative uses, it's kind of weird, it can throw you off, but you can get used to that. It's not really that bad, and it kind of has some neat effects to it. So the second interaction is pretty much just a matter of punishment, and it's actually a lot more complicated in its nature. So this actually comes sort of down to the way that Stepmania does its timing windows. So an absolutely basic anti-ghosting technology is obviously when you tap a key, it only goes for one note. Otherwise, if you had like 3 notes close to each other, you just tap one key, assuming that they're on the same key, you get like a marvelous or fantastic for one, then you get a great in the next one, you get a boo on the one after because your single input just went for 3 different notes, and that would make some bizarre, impossible things hilariously doable with really bad timings, but would otherwise just be ridiculously frustrating and honestly stupid. So obviously, you get one tap, you do one note. One input goes to one note, and that's just a pretty basic thing. There's no real problem with that. However, lifts can make this a little more complicated and cause an unfun thing. So I've made just a really bad MS Paint diagram here to help show you how this goes. So, We got here, red rectangle, and red rectangle, those are your notes. Lift the blue rectangle, and then the orange and purple larger rectangles with the overlap there are respectively the timing windows. Because timing windows includes the right up to the boot timing window, these will actually often be a lot larger in effect than this diagram shows. But just to sort of illustrate a difference, I'm just showing it like this. So the thing is that, like I explained, Stepmania accepts one timing window for one column at a time, so that you can't hit multiple notes with a single tap. And this is fine except when lifts complicate this. So lifts, basically you have one tap, one timing, but what happens when you've got a lift? Well, earlier we covered how actually lifts are treated like notes by the engine in most ways, and this is where that sucks. So what you get here is basically, if you're on time, you're fine. You tap the note, you lift the note. So you tap the note, you lift the note, you tap the second note, you're good. But let's say you screw up the transition, you're a little too slow, you're behind because it's actually part of a long jack, or just you choke it and you miss that first note. Okay, you miss that first note, oh, a little too late to really hit that lift, so let's say you don't hit that lift, you don't get the lift in time. Alright, so now you go to tap note 2, you gotta get back on track, you choked a note, but you're not going for the FC or whatever, so you're not gonna just quit out. Well, let's say you see this overlap between that purple and orange there, between the lift window and the note 2 window. Let's say you put down your tap during that, trying to catch up with an earlier timing. Well, you've got one input, one column, and what happens here is you try to hit a note and nothing happens, because hold on a second, wait a moment, bud. That's lift timing territory. That timing window, that's reserved for lift 1 over there, and what you just did, that was a tap, that wasn't a lift, so that doesn't count. And just like that, it just ate your tap input. You pressed the note, you tapped it down, nothing happened, because you are in that lift timing window, and you registered a tap, which isn't a lift, so it ignores it, and then what usually happens is with that timing discrepancy, you lift, but you're too late for lift 1, and now you're too late to tap note 2, and you just miss everything. Like, in the worst cases, it just feels like you got a Windows update, and it just alt-tabbed your game out of focus, so none of your inputs are even being taken. Especially because, thanks to a lot of note animations, you won't even see, like, the little bounce of the receptors from when you hit no note. It really seems like your inputs just stopped working. Your keyboard's broken. I don't know. It's pretty infuriating. So what you get is this effect where, like, if you put sequential lifts right after notes in the same column, then if you fall off at all, then suddenly the lifts just start eating your inputs. Stepmania just doesn't take them, and you can just get a giant string of misses. And that's not really fun, but it's a strange interaction, and you can use it to deliberately create harsh timing. So the example that I'm going to get here, and actually, okay, first let's just go over it, is basically what happens here is, if you miss note 1, then until lift 1's hit, this timing window is reserved for lifts, so even if you tap down here to hit note 2, nothing happens, because the lift has overlapped that timing window, and it's still waiting for a timing for that lift. This is sort of similar to the concept of CB rushing, where because you hit one note too late in a whole run, then everything starts, like, say in a very fast drill, everything just starts counting, has a late timing for the note after, or an early timing for the note before, whichever way you're off, and then you get a ton of boos in what should be like nearly a PFC plus one mistake. This is that, but just like on hell mode, where you just miss everything and die, and it's horrible, and recovery is really garbage, because you just have to get it right into that one little note window, if there even is any opening. If it's too fast, there can pretty much not be one. And otherwise, you're just basically overlapped out of timing window, unless you like tap twice as fast to just get spam some inputs in there, and then you better hope you don't get late from doing something weird like that. Okay, so example I have here is when I charted Megalodon, I charted Rewind, a long strumming section. I did it as a fairly slow but extended jack section, but I put lifts in between pretty much every single eighth, so that, it's fairly easy to play, but now and then I miss a single note and then regret all of my life decisions and hate myself passionately. So I'm just going to try and give it a play here, and then I'm going to try and sort of fall behind a little bit so you can see what it's like. I might take a try or two, so sorry about this, but let's give it a go. So we start... Okay. See? Immediately. I started late, and then because I missed that, you see how I just missed it? So we're fine here, but... So this is good. I'm getting early because you often want to this, but let's say I go late. Oh! Misses like 5... Okay! And then, let's say you're late for 1. You have these tiny timing windows, but if you fall off, if you go like slow, then you're definitely not hitting nearly as many as you want. It's kind of frustrating. And if you combine this with chords, so like, if you combine this with chords, so like say you had this, and then you had this, and your lift was like this, and then this, and you just spammed it with the chord jacks of the one overlapping note and chord cohesion and all that going, so that any single mistake, you just get a section where it's basically, you suddenly put it into sudden death mode because the first miss has destroyed all timing windows and you're just never getting anything to work again. And when if you turn it into a horrific, like, chord jack-based section, then it really does. You get the full effect of, it feels like Windows 10 just popped up some update or whatever. You just got something that pulled your Stepmania out of focus, and you don't have any inputs at all. And yeah, so you could use this to create, like, incredibly punishing sections, or emphasis jacks that really require that you hit them early and just hit them on pace, often prompting to go desperately a little faster. But be aware that it's just one of the most frustrating things to actually play, and I'm just kind of a masochist like that. Because you don't even really see your note input doing its thing at all, so it's just like, oh, the game no longer works. My keyboard's broken. Not the most fun experience, and one of the more frustrating, bizarre interactions. And you can actually make this... You can tune how bad this is, although it can make the lift itself harder by, like, say, putting it down a 30-second, because now that lift, like, it's just getting totally... It can just really eat that note after, and then timing window-wise entirely, if you miss that first note. Or if you put it up here, you've got more of a lenient timing window for this note, but the lift here is going to actually start just giving people super frustrating grates and stuff, even if they're tapping immediately, because the lift timing windows don't seem to be as nicely tuned, and that could just be a matter of I don't have nearly as much reflex for when I lift keys compared to when I tap them, because people don't use lifts, because, well, many reasons, among them things like this, where they're very strangely coded and clearly not developed that much for. So that's interaction 2, and I think I said there's some interesting mechanics, but these are the only 2 that come to mind with specific examples. I played around a little bit with the timing windows and looked at some hold stuff, but a lot of the other stuff is just sort of a mechanic of interactions on chord cohesion, like just how, say, having a hold and another like what does a jump with another non-hold note goes, where you can hit the hold and not the note, but you can't hit the note and not the hold, and you can get things like that with a lift, where it's like you have to actually, you can hit the hold and not the lift, but you can't get the lift if you don't hit the hold. Stuff like that, but that's not as clear. These are the 2 weird and specific interactions to do with lifts that I've actually found, and I just wanted to make this short little setup or demo for it, because I haven't seen anything about this posted anywhere, probably because nobody really uses lifts. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching, if you did, and, well, hopefully you took some enjoyment or amusement out of this mostly entirely inapplicable inane trivia. See ya!